distorted view.
Why is it that some among us manage to live meaningful and inspired lives, while others are trapped in the rat race? Pick an era in history, and you'll find a handful of people across industries and continents who challenge the status quo. But for most of us, responsibilities, self-doubt, and the daily grind can make us feel trapped. We get worn down and burnt out and start to lose faith in our vision for the future. We begin to think that maybe there is no real path beyond sheer luck to fulfillment and financial stability. I've always been fascinated with learning about how others buck the norm. Are there patterns to success and fulfillment that the masses are missing? Is genius really what you think it is? Is genius something we all can achieve? And if so, what leads to genius? How do we speed up progress in business or in life? Can serendipity be engineered? Can luck be manufactured? Can convention be defied? Can ordinary people find genius? Join me as I uncover the process, the insights, the story behind ordinary people's stroke of genius. This is the untold story of ordinary people with genius ideas. Our next guest is a portfolio manager by day and a published author by night. Yes, you heard that right. She actually has a 9-to-5 job, and she still managed to be the author of The Blood Heir. And she's just getting started. This is just the first book in a fantasy trilogy. Please welcome Amelie Zhao. So let's start with your background. Can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up, where you went to college, what you majored in?
Yeah, so I was born in Paris. I grew up in Beijing in an international school. So I received an international education. And then I came to the US for college. I graduated from New York University with a major in finance and accounting because I was on the track to a career in finance, essentially. And then publishing happened.
Got it. Okay. So did you know what you wanted to do when you graduated from college initially? You were definitely going to work in finance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was young, writing books was always the dream, but I knew that, it's probably not sustainable to be just an artist right off the bat, especially having practical Asian parents. They gently advised me, oh, it's great you want to write books, but first you have to be able to feed yourself, pay your bills, and survive. So I've always loved economics, and I've always loved global politics, etc. So I thought finance would be a great place to start. So throughout high school, I majored or focused on economics, and then I went on track to the Stern School of Business at NYU and graduated in finance.
Okay, awesome. So today you work in Citibank.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Citibank? What are your hours like at Citibank?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started working at Citi right out of college, and right now I work as a portfolio manager across Asia Pacific clients. So what I do is I manage the relationships of major institutional corporates that bank with Citi. And pitch products to them, etc. Maintain the relationship.
Okay. And so about 2 years ago, you actually made the decision to write a book. So can you tell me a little bit about...
More than 2 years ago.
More than 2 years ago now? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, why you decided to write a book? Like what compelled you to do it? And where did you get the idea to write this book?
Yeah. So it was 2014. I had just graduated college and started my job. And I've always believed in just working really hard and trying to fill my hours with being as productive as possible and trying to always be doing more to achieve, various dreams that I have in life.
Yeah.
And then one dream of mine since I was around 6 years old, I think, when the teachers asked you in class, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was like, I want to be an author. So I had graduated college, and then I was set with my job in finance at Citibank. And, when you're a student, you spend all of your extra hours maybe doing extracurriculars or studying or prepping for tests, etc. So I found that after work, I didn't have that much to fill up my evenings with besides just grabbing dinner with friends and networking. And I thought, the hours in between, these are, pieces of time that I could gather and try to morph into something productive. So I said, I've always wanted to try writing a book and I love it and it's a way for me to relax. So why don't I just start trying it? So we had just taken a graduation trip to Russia at the time, and I was captivated by the story of the missing Duchess Anastasia Romanov.
Okay.
Unfortunately, she's dead now, but at the time it was also a children's movie with Fox's Anastasia.
Okay.
That I grew up with. So that was kind of the inspiration for my book Blood Heir, about a lost princess who comes back to avenge her overthrown family.
Wow.
So then I started writing and rewriting, and it's been 5 years later. Here we are.
Wow. So like when you started writing, did you have this like goal in mind? Did you think to yourself, okay, like I want to write a bestseller? Did you have a timeline in mind? Did you think like, okay, in a year I want to have, or in 2 years I want my book to be published? What was it kind of your thought process around it?
I think it started out as, I just wanted to be writing to kind of have some fun, like right before bed at night, or like, when I wasn't out at dinner or networking, etc. It was just a way for me to decompress initially.
Okay.
But then I started, reading a bit more and then studying techniques from other authors and reading craft books. And I thought, okay, like if I keep writing and rewriting this, maybe I can bring it to the level where, I can, move it to the next step, like get an agent, sell it to a publisher, etc. So I didn't have a timeline in mind at the time. I think the writing process takes a long time to not even perfect, but to just make it quality and make it better. And I think all good things take time. So I wrote and rewrote this book, I think probably 5 to 7 times between 2014 to 2017, 2018. And then I finally got it to the point where readers were coming back to me and they loved the book, they loved the story, and published authors were coming to me and saying, this is great. So I thought, okay, maybe it's time to move to the next step.
Got it. Okay. So first of all, I love a lot of the things that you were just saying, that you were writing to decompress, that, you had a lot of fun writing. So I think that's a really good sign, because it sounds like you're really passionate about, what you were doing. Can you like slow us down, take us to the very, very beginning of the process? Tell me a little bit about, kind of how you even create this roadmap for yourself when it came to writing a book. Because, say I'm somebody who, wants to write a book. I know nothing about the process at all. How did you become familiar with the process? Ooh. What sort of tools or resources did you utilize? Where did you start?
I think it was Edison that said, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. So right. I think the writing process is a lot like that. It's through trial and error.
Right.
Nobody starts out, unless you're like one of those geniuses, of course, nobody starts out being able to just write a book in one go. It's all about figuring out what the best process is for you. So for example, some people like to we call them pantsers. They just like to go with no direction, no plot, no story, and just make it up as they go along.
Yeah.
Other people outline, so they create a roadmap, as you said, for themselves of where this book is going, every single twist and turn and plot point, what the characters are doing, and then they write very methodically based on that.
Right.
So every writer has a different process. It's just a matter of seeing which one works best for you and however the creative side of your brain works.
Right. And then I know when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that you were actually studying best-selling books and kind of you're I guess kind of put together a criteria for yourself. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. Can you tell me a little bit about like, how did you start studying? Like, how did you get the idea to do that?
I think that first of all, if you want to be a writer, then you have to be a reader.
Yes.
I think that you pick up your art from, getting a sense of what others are doing and what others are doing well,
right,
and what you like from their works. So I found that there were certain books that I tended to gravitate towards that I wanted to write and
right,
that I wanted to read. And I focused on these books and I started to study them. I looked at, the last English class I took was in high school. It was like, high school English. But we learned a lot of the creative writing devices, literary devices, etc., that you can use in your writing to make it an enjoyable structure? Because while it's something creative, there's a formula to tapping into the reader's brain's enjoyment. So I was looking at all these books that I love and seeing, okay, like, how does she open this? How does she, insert this point of view, etc.? What does she do well? So it's not really a criteria. It's more like trying to figure out what I love about this craft.
Right. And
trying to put that into something formulaic that guides my creative writing process.
Gotcha. And for those of us who are like completely unfamiliar with, the creative writing process, are there some formulas that maybe somebody who wants to write a book should know about? Just curious.
I think it's less formulas than certain, I guess, different ways to do your craft, essentially. Okay. I wouldn't say there's a single formula, but there are things that work well within certain genres.
Okay.
And they're extremely different across the board. But I can say, for example, my current series is a young adult fantasy.
Right.
And for the young adult genre, we're writing mostly for teens and for children. So you want to go in with a very approachable point of view. Okay. You want something that is relatively quick moving and fast paced to be able to keep drawing attention.
Right.
Whereas adult novels tend to, linger way more on the prose, on describing things that might seem irrelevant, on building a really, really complex world.
Right.
So I think that there are many different ways to approach it, but certain genres tend towards certain formulas, as we say.
Gotcha. So another question for you is, did you start off kind of like with a message that you wanted to like incorporate into your story, or did you just want to tell a really good, like entertaining story? Just curious, like did you have some sort of message that you were compelled to share with the world?
Yeah, definitely. I think that growing up, the books that mattered the most to me were the ones that entertained, but that also could tell us a message or help us learn something about the world around us.
Right.
So in Blood Heir, I think one of the central messages is about identity. So growing up and across cultures, in a multicultural and international community, you always have different pieces of yourself from different cultures and your different backgrounds and upbringings that you're trying to reconcile with the world around you. And as a teen in high school, the world around me presented as my high school. Yeah, so everyone at my high school was, from the US, the UK, from Europe, and I had been born in Paris, but I'm Chinese.
Right.
So trying to get close to their culture and understand, the pop culture that they're drawing from, all the trends and what they liked, topics of conversation, those were things that I really struggled to find ways to fit into.
Okay.
And it's a part of me that these different identities are things that I struggle with every day. So code shifting when I'm talking to certain different cultural groups, etc. So Blood Heir is all about learning that these different pieces of you that you might want to hide from certain parts of society are makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Right. So the protagonist is a girl who has the terrifying power to control blood. And for her entire life, she's been taught that this is something monstrous that she shouldn't have and shouldn't show to society. But in the end, she learns that this power is what makes her strong, and that society is going to give you many, many labels, especially young girls have many, many labels.
Yeah.
And that she just needs to break through the labels of princess or monster and just be herself and do what she wants.
I love that.
Thank
love that.
you.
I write a blog also, and I just wrote a blog on just that, being labeled and, and being put in a box, and how that can kind of, in a sense, trap you. Or limit you.
Absolutely.
And I feel like we are all, capable of just so many different things. And, sometimes we can just find ourselves psychologically trapped. And we shouldn't let, other people's labels or other people put us in a box. So I really, really like that message.
Thank you.
So I wanted to know a little bit about how you kind of maintain this sense of urgency when you were writing the book. Because, to write for so many years, I think it just takes a lot of stamina. So how did you kind of, maintain this sense of urgency?
I think it's about just setting a goal and forcing yourself to get to it. Because when you're like, now I have, you know, an editor, a publishing house, an agent, and I have deadlines that if I don't make, I let down other people, and I have a contract at stake. But back from 2014 to now, or to 2018 before I got published, when I didn't have all these things, it was about just really forcing myself to keep doing it, like keep going. And, you know, some days, like everyone just wants to like relax, kick back, watch some TV. And some days I would do that. But there were some days when I said, okay, I gave myself this goal. I have to keep working on it. And I would set hours aside for myself to try to accomplish certain word goals every day, etc.
Okay.
And sometimes, like, if I'd given myself a relaxing night and I realized I hadn't hit my goal, I would literally, like, my fiance or then boyfriend would be sleeping on the bed next to me. I would just crawl out of bed, like go sit at my computer and start writing. So I think the first book, Blood Heir, was written probably mostly between the hours of like 10 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Because you were working full time too.
Right. I still am.
Yes.
Yeah.
I forget about that too. I was going to ask you that. I'm like, are you still working full time? Because now that you're signed, that's amazing.
Thank you.
So on average, like, do you know how many hours you would write a week?
I would say I try to do most of my writing on the weekends, because it's much easier to have a long stretch of time when you really are able to sink into what you're doing.
Right.
So I try to block out, you know, weekend mornings for that and weekend evenings, as well as if I am able to get home from work one day and it hasn't been too draining on me, then I try to, you know, write from like, I don't know, 8 to when I go to sleep. So I would say I try to do 5 to 10 hours a week at least.
That is amazing. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you're juggling your responsibilities at work and writing? I mean, you're writing and it takes a lot of creative like power and energy. So how are you doing that?
When I know the answer, I'll let you know.
Well, you clearly do know the answer because you're doing it.
I've been doing this for around almost 2 years now since I got signed. It just takes a lot of, you know, squeezing time where you normally wouldn't find it. So for example, if I want to watch some TV, you know, that is deprioritized compared to my writing. And if I do want to watch a part of my favorite show, I will do it while I'm eating dinner, for example, at home, if I don't have any other commitments. So it's like multitasking. And also if I, for example, my commute on the train in the morning, I don't have anything to do then, I'll read a book. So it's about finding these little cracks of time to do things that you to do more things, basically, and then squeezing all the rest of the time after work to be able to work on your book.
That's amazing. You're amazing. So, okay, so let's back up for a second in the timeline. So you spent all this time writing your book. Tell me about, you know, the process of like finding an editor. Like, how did you move the book forward once you kind of had like your first draft, I guess? I don't know. Tell me exactly what the timeline was. You wrote and then you found an editor, and how did you like move forward from there?
Yeah, so the publishing process, and I'm talking about traditional publishing. So that's where you go with a traditional publishing house. It's that you first have to find or sign with an agent who then sells your book to a publishing house. So I queried like 30 agents, and then the agents essentially are like not really the gatekeepers, but the first kind of door you have to pass to get your foot further in the door of publishing. So they read your manuscript, and if they like it, if they think it has potential to sell, they'll probably offer to represent you. So I had several offers of representation. I think this was end of 2017. And I went with an amazing agent, best decision of my career in publishing. We revised for another 1 to 2 months, but I had spent a lot of time revising and rewriting by myself that he said it was pretty much ready to go. So the agent's job then is to pitch to publishing houses and see if one of them likes the manuscript enough to be able to purchase it. Yeah. So I think it was December of 2017, we pitched to all the big 5 publishing houses, and we got bids from all of them.
That's amazing. Wow.
It was unbelievable and incredible. The best month of my life. So we luckily had offers to choose from.
Right.
So I ended up signing with Random House.
Wow. Yeah. Congratulations again, because that's so amazing. I'm really, really like just, I can't say any other word than amazing, because it's just amazing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to stop you even, before you found your agent. So how did you actually find, readers to give you feedback on your first couple of manuscripts? I know you mentioned something earlier about, going on Twitter and connecting with, writing communities there.
Yeah, so I think that one of the most important processes or parts of the writing process is finding readers and critique partners who can help you give feedback on your manuscript. Because you can go and study books and draw on the techniques that you love from authors you love, but you need people to validate that you're actually doing something that readers might like. So I went on Twitter and connected with several writers in the writing community, and they're still my friends today. And then we started exchanging manuscripts and just giving feedback on what we loved about each other's books and what we thought could improve. So this not only helped me improve, their feedback not only helped me improve, but I found that giving feedback to them also helped a lot, because when you look at someone's book and you think, okay, these are the things that I really love, and these are the things that are not quite clicking with me, you start to think about why, and you start to apply those techniques into your own writing.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really, really smart. That makes a lot of sense. So how did you get the idea to even go on Twitter, and where did you find these communities? What are some of the names of them for people who are interested in writing themselves? Yeah.
So there's, I found one of my critique partners there's something called CP Match on Twitter.
Okay.
It's a hashtag. I think it happens on certain dates every year, but you just type in CP Match for critique partner match, and you can find that.
Okay, so I wanted to get back to asking you a little bit more about your experience with finding an agent. So for those of us who are aspiring writers, can you tell me a little bit about the process of identifying people to actually reach out to? How did you actually reach out to them?
Yeah, of course. So there are online databases of agents in the business. I think they register with them, etc. So you can definitely find them like that. And there are a lot of interviews, etc. A lot of material on each agent. So I'm one of those people who loves Excel spreadsheets. I work in finance. We love them.
Me too. I also like them.
Yeah, they're so useful.
Yeah.
So I had compiled an Excel spreadsheet on all of the agents that I came across that were doing the young adult fantasy genre, which was the genre for my debut. So I wrote, what their name was, what house they were in, who their clients were, their successes, fun facts about them. And each one might be looking for a little different flavor of a book. So things that, might check boxes for them. And then based on that, I sorted them into, people that I would really, really like to work with. So the process is called querying. So what you do is essentially you submit a short pitch of your book. There are guidelines for this. It's called a query. You submit a pitch. It's kind of like submitting your cover letter, saying why you should pick me and why you should read my manuscript. So most agents only want this pitch. Based on how well it's written, based on, what your book is about, basically, they will then decide if they want to ask you to send them your full manuscript or not. So that has to first pass the test. So if they request your manuscript, then you send them your manuscript. And then if they like your manuscript, then they might make you an offer. So it's a long process. Most people take months, if not years, during this process. But it's really about just trying to figure out, who you want to work with and who might click best with you. And because I was in the scenario where I had multiple offers, so I could select which agent I clicked best with, I had made sure I had either face-to-face meetings with them or phone conversations to make sure that we clicked. Because this is someone who's going to be advocating for you. This is someone who understands all the ropes in publishing. all the money, the contracts, everything. So they're going to be working for you. So you want them, they're going to be your rock and they're going to be your partner in this business.
Yeah.
So you're going to want someone that you can trust really and have a good partnership with.
Got it. And what are some of the names of these online databases where we can find?
I actually don't know.
It's okay.
I think you can just type literary agents and I'm sure you'll find a bunch of them. There definitely are databases. I just can't remember the name of them.
That's okay. You have probably a lot on your mind. A whole other book.
I just have a bad memory. A whole other book.
So I actually wanted to know, what's the difference between self-publishing and then finding a publisher like Penguin Random House? Yeah, so I can speak more to traditional publishing versus self-publishing because that's where I work. Both are just getting your book out there. I think that what happens with self-publishing is that you have to do the marketing, the placements, packaging the book, everything. I think you have to take care of by yourself. Whereas with traditional publishing, my publishing house is getting me cover artists. They have a whole marketing team to create a package for a book that they think will appeal to readers, that will get them into certain bookstores, that'll get good placement on a shelf. And then, so from the packaging of the book to how they market it, they have connections with Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, all the bookstores, and they can get you into it. Right. They know how to pitch, and obviously they're established in the business. So I'm sure these accounts also take a lot of stock on what they're putting forward. So it's just the benefit of all this marketing, I think, from a traditional publishing perspective. Other than that, I'm not too familiar with what else self-publishing entails. So I think that's my overall assessment. Got it. Yeah. Okay. And so now that you have actually written your first book, right? When did it officially come out? November 19th. November 19th. Yep. Okay. And so what have you been doing since then? November was such a busy month. Like, there's so much leading up to the publication and after publication. So you have to do like interviews, you have to do like radio, photos, like content for social media, etc. A lot of words.
There's an audiobook, but I'm gonna do my best. So this is when Anna, she breaks into the prison and she meets the really annoying conman who just immediately gets on her nerves. He hasn't had a bath in a few months. So, yeah. Drawing a sharp breath to summon her courage, Anna threw back her shoulders and stepped into the cell. The rancid smell of vomit hit her, along with the stench of human excrement and sweat. In the farthest corner of the cell, a figure slumped against the grime-covered wall. His shirt and breeches were torn and bloody, his wrists chafed from the manacles that locked him to the wall. All she could see was matted brown hair until he raised his head, revealing a beard covering half of his face, filthy with bits of food and grime. Thank you for being cleaner than this, Clement. This was the criminal mastermind whose name she'd forced from the lips of almost a dozen convicts and crooks, the man on whom she had pinned all her hopes for the past 11 months. She froze, however, as his eyes focused on her with sharp intent. He was young, much younger than she'd expected for a renowned crime lord of the Empire. Surprise twanged in her stomach. This is where you find out that he's actually really hot. A big YA second. Quick Tongue, she said, testing her voice, and then louder. Ramson Quick Tongue. Is that your real name? The corner of the prisoner's mouth curled in a grin. Depends on how you define real. What's real and not tends to get twisted in places like this. His voice was smooth, and he had the faint lilt of a crisp, high-class Cyrillian accent. What's your name, darling? The question caught her off guard. It had been nearly a year since she'd exchanged pleasantries with anyone other than May. Anastasia Mikhailov, she wanted to say. My name is Anastasia Mikhailov. Except it wasn't. Anastasia Mikhailov was the name of the crown princess of Cyrilia, drowned 11 moons past in her attempt to escape execution for murder and treason against the Cyrillian crown. Anastasia Mikhailov was a ghost and a monster who did not and should not exist. This is seriously some emo shit that I wrote. Anna fisted her hands tightly over the clasp of her hood. My name is none of your concern. How fast can you find someone within the Empire? The prisoner laughed. How much can you pay me? Which is totally valid as someone who works in finance, right? Like, how much can you pay me for what I'm going to do? He tilted his mouth a mocking curve. Depends on who you're looking for. Several weeks, perhaps. I'll trace my network of wicked spies and twisted crooks to your precious person of concern. He paused and clasped his hands together, his chains jangling loudly with the movement. Hypothetically, of course, there are limits to even what I can do from inside a prison cell. This dude just needs to get over himself. Like, he smells so bad, and he's trying to flirt with her. Like, ew. But, yeah, I hope you guys like that.
There's just so much leading up to it and after that. So November was a solidly booked month for me. And then now that December's rolled around, I'm looking at the deadline for my next book, which is the second in the trilogy.
Oh my God, that's exciting.
Thank you. It is due in exactly 1 month from today. So I'm back in what the writers call the revisions cave. So where I've submitted the first draft. My editor at my publishing house has given me comments and feedback, and I have to revise the book. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So how long did it take you to write the second book now?
Ooh.
Was it a lot faster? It sounds like it was. Yeah.
It was painfully fast, I would say. I think that when your debut novel, before you sign with an agent and before you have a contract for publishers,
right.
You can take as much time as you want. You can, tinker with this and then like do this and that with the plot. But once you're on contract, they need this book in 6 months. Like, it's due. Mine was due in August, so you have to hand it in at that point.
In 6 months.
It depends on when you start, but
wow.
My first draft was due this past August,
okay.
And then my next revised draft is due in January.
Wow.
So it's deadlines that you can't miss, and it's just a lot faster. So I wrote the second book I started last August. But I took a break to revise book 1, and a lot of things came between that. So I officially probably wrote it between March to August of this year.
Oh my God. And you're still working full time at Citibank, right?
Yep.
That's amazing.
Thank
you.
No,
that's crazy. Crazy, but amazing. And that's like my word for this interview, because like I just still can't believe that you've been writing so much. So this process is super overwhelming. Can you tell me a little bit more about, a time when you felt overwhelmed? How did you deal with that? Or even a time that you felt like unsure about this entire process, because you were juggling, working full time and writing. Did your doubt ever like stop you or slow you down?
Yeah, there have been so many times, and there will continue to be so many times in the publishing process when you doubt yourself, starting from a reader's maybe negative feedback towards your manuscript, to getting, agent rejections on querying, and then to, maybe a publisher rejects your book.
Yeah.
And then even once you're, signed for a publishing contract, whether you're going to get good marketing, whether your book will make it to at so-and-so bookstore, and whether your sales are going to do well. It's a constant process of, more and more obstacles. Like, once you open the door to publishing, there are 10,000 other doors that you're going to have to walk through.
Right.
And some of them you're not going to get through. Like, some people, if it's a very realistic scenario where you get your first book deal, your sales don't do well, you might not get another one unless you find something that the publishing world things will click with readers. So
right.
It's art. It's a creative process. So I think that in the middle of self-doubt, you just have to remember that, I'm doing something that I love, writing.
Yeah.
And no matter where it brings me, I'm going to keep doing it. And however big my contract is, however much money I get, obviously it's better to have more, but at the end of the day, it's the art that you love. And that's something that I really thought about just this morning as I was getting to work writing. You know, I dragged myself out of bed at like 7:30 and I was like, ugh, I'm so tired. I wish I could have slept. But then I just got into the writing and it just reminded me of everything that I love in this business. So that's one part of it. And I've also just believed, you know, a friend showed me a quote the other day that said, hustle, the only controllable pillar of success. And I love that quote because there's never going to be anything else that you can control unless you're, you know, Elon Musk or something. The only thing you can control is whether or not you keep hustling, whether or not you keep writing, or, you know, working towards whatever you love. And as long as you still have that fire within you, no matter how much comes in your way, you're going to keep going.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I feel like the hard work definitely comes before the success. And I feel like you almost like feel like you're successful when you're kind of consistent and you're working really hard before you even get all the accolades. I feel like you feel good keeping that promise to yourself. So I definitely like that quote definitely resonates with me. So can you tell me a little bit more about maybe a time when you failed, maybe you got feedback that you know didn't particularly, you know, like or wasn't positive. How did you deal with that? And
oh my gosh, very recently for my second book, I had written it, you know, in 6 months, and my editor and sent it into my editor. And what I got back was usually we get back what are called edit letters. And it's kind of like one line of like, you write great. And then it's like 16 pages of like, okay, here's everything you need to change, everything that's wrong with your book, everything you need to change, everything that we don't like. So just getting that feedback on my second book, because when you first write it, you're like, this is the best thing in the world. Like, this is
my baby.
Yeah, this is my baby, like the next big thing. And then you get all this feedback and it really just humbles you and just grounds you. And you have to remember that, you know, there will always be challenges and there will always be things you can improve on, and that all of this is happening for a reason, to make your writing better, to make your book better. So that's kind of how I think about it. And it's part of the job to receive criticism, to receive feedback and critique, and that's how you keep improving yourself in this game.
No, it's so true. Is there anything that, you know, now having written one published book that's out for everyone to read and, you know, working on the trilogy, is there anything that you learned now that you wish you knew when you were younger, before you started writing?
I didn't know anything about the publishing industry going in. So there is so much that I've learned. But I honestly would not go back and change anything about what I knew when I was younger. I think, you know, life is just a trial and error process, and, you know, what's it called? Hindsight is 20/20, right? And you just keep learning and keep growing. So obviously the whole, like how the whole publishing industry works and like the writing process, etc. That's all, everything I've learned in the past few years. And if I were my younger self again, I would just have to relearn it.
I guess that makes sense. So I wanted to know, what do you think was the key insight, or what do you think was your stroke of genius throughout this whole entire process that actually, I guess, what contributed to you taking action?
So I think that my motto has been to hustle. Like that's the only thing I can control in my life and in success. So whether, you know, you get your first agent rejection, whether you get rejected by the publisher at the door, whether readers don't like your book, you know, you're always going to have to hustle, and you're always going to have to keep writing to keep in the game. Like if you write a book and it's successful, great. It's time to write the next book. If you write a book and it's not successful, you have to write another book, right? So that's just something I've always gone by. Just, you know, focus on yourself. You know, there are so many factors and so many wishes and desires, obviously, in life that you could have. But the only thing you can control are your own actions and how much you work towards that.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So your stroke of genius would be perseverance then? Is that what you're saying?
Right, and hard work.
It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I'm so excited to share. I'm sure everybody is really excited to hear. What is the name of your book, And where can we find you on social media?
Yeah.
Where can we actually buy the book?
Yeah, so my book is called Blood Heir. It is the first in a fantasy trilogy about a princess who is exiled and framed for her father's murder. And she has to seek revenge. But on her quest to do so, she finds a greater corruption gripping her empire, and she has to unravel that.
Wow.
Yeah. It is available in Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. I think anywhere you can find books, it will be available. And on social media, I am at Amelie Zhao on Instagram and on Twitter.
I'm sure the audience is super excited to read your book. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so happy to be here. Thank you.